The high desert stretched out in all directions, a desolate expanse of crimson sands and jagged, black rock formations that gleamed under the twin suns of Arethos V. The air shimmered with heat, rippling like a mirage, each gust of wind sharp with a metallic tang. Yet for the team of human researchers from the United Galactic Alliance, this alien world was nothing short of a treasure trove. They were here to study what no one had dared before, the arcane energy fields that the locals, an enigmatic race called the Ceylor, referred to as thaumic currents. Dr. Evelyn Cross adjusted her visor as she gazed out over the barren landscape. The portable sensor pack strapped to her back emitted a rhythmic hum, its readings displayed in sharp holographic detail on her wrist console. Beside her, Lieutenant Jack Ward of the UGA Exploration Corps had his plasma rifle slung over his shoulder, his stance alert and ever ready for trouble. Their third companion, Dr. Myles Karim, squinted at his own console with a mixture of frustration and awe. "These readings are impossible," Myles muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. "We're picking up coherent energy signatures with properties that defy established physics. This is like magic." Jack snorted, his tone skeptical. "Magic? You science types must hate when reality doesn't fit the manual." Evelyn shot him a glare. "We do. But he's not wrong. The data doesn't fit any known framework. The thaumic currents seem to interact with subatomic particles in ways we can't explain. It's why we're here." The Ceylor themselves had been reluctant to share their knowledge. Tall, graceful beings with skin that shimmered like liquid metal, they communicated through a complex combination of gestures, colors, and harmonic tones. They had allowed the humans to visit their world only after extensive negotiations, and even then, the agreement was clear: no interference, no disruptions, and absolutely no attempts to replicate their magic. It didn't take long for the first sign of trouble to appear. Evelyn's console beeped urgently, the holographic display flashing red. She frowned, tapping a few commands to isolate the anomaly. The thaumic field in their vicinity was spiking dramatically, the elegant waveforms collapsing into jagged peaks. "Something's wrong," she said. "The field's destabilizing." Myles glanced at her, his face pale. "That's not supposed to happen. The Ceylor said these currents were self-regulating. What could be causing this?" Jack tightened his grip on his rifle. "You're the brains, I'm the insurance policy. Let's keep it simple." A low rumble reverberated through the ground, growing steadily louder. The three humans exchanged uneasy glances before Jack stepped forward, scanning the horizon. A sudden explosion of sand and rock ripped through the distance. From the swirling chaos, a shimmering figure emerged, its form both alien and menacing. It was a Ceylor, but not like the ones they had met in the crystalline city of Thalinus. This one was darker, its metallic skin marred by streaks of crimson, and its eyes, if they could be called eyes, burned with an unnatural light. "Ah, that doesn't look friendly," Jack said, raising his weapon. The figure moved with terrifying speed, closing the distance in seconds. It raised an arm, and a bolt of searing energy shot toward them. Jack dove to the side, firing a volley of plasma rounds in response. Evelyn and Myles scrambled for cover behind a jagged rock formation, their minds racing to make sense of what was happening. "That's not just a Ceylor," Myles whispered, his voice trembling. "It's something else. Something corrupted." Evelyn's heart pounded as she studied the creature's movements. It wasn't just attacking, it was channeling the destabilized thaumic currents, amplifying their chaotic energy. If left unchecked, it could trigger a catastrophic chain reaction. "We have to stop it," she said, her voice firm despite the fear clawing at her chest. "Stop it? With what?" "Harsh language," Jack shouted, ducking behind a rock as another energy bolt narrowly missed him. Myles' eyes lit up with a sudden idea. "The resonance disruptor. We brought it to calibrate our equipment, but if we can tune it to the creature's frequency, we might be able to destabilize its connection to the thaumic field." "Might?" Jack growled, firing another burst of plasma. "That's comforting." Evelyn didn't hesitate. "It's our best shot. Myles, get the disruptor ready. Jack, keep it distracted." "Oh, sure, just let me put on my clown shoes," Jack muttered, but he obeyed without question. He darted out from cover, firing in short, controlled bursts as he zigzagged across the terrain. The creature's attention shifted to him, its attacks growing more frenzied. Meanwhile, Myles dug through his equipment pack, pulling out a compact device bristling with antennae and glowing panels. His fingers flew over the controls as he worked to adjust the settings. Evelyn knelt beside him, her eyes flicking between the disruptor and the creature. "Almost there," Myles said, his voice tight with concentration. "Just a few more seconds." They didn't have a few seconds. The creature roared, a sound that resonated deep in their bones, and unleashed a wave of energy that sent Jack flying. He hit the ground hard, his rifle skidding out of reach. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. "Jack," he groaned, pushing himself up on one elbow. "I'm fine. Just do the thing. Now, Myles," Evelyn urged. Myles activated the disruptor, and a high-pitched whine filled the air. The device emitted a pulsing wave of energy that clashed with the creature's aura. For a moment, it seemed to falter, its movements jerky and uncoordinated. But then it let out another roar, and the disruptor's pulse wavered. "It's not enough," Myles shouted. "The field's too unstable." Evelyn's mind raced. They needed more power, more resonance. She glanced at her sensor pack, an idea forming. "What if we link it to my pack? The sensors are already tuned to the field. It might amplify the disruptor's output." "That could overload the circuits," Myles warned. "And if it backfires?" "We're out of options," she said, her voice steely with determination. She adjusted the disruptor, her fingers steady despite the chaos. Working quickly, they connected the sensor pack to the disruptor. The device's hum grew louder, its pulses stronger and more focused. The creature convulsed, its aura crackling like a broken signal, teetering between existence and oblivion. Jack, still sprawled on the ground, managed a weak grin. "Looks like it's working." But the creature wasn't done yet. With a final, desperate surge, it charged at them, its form blurring into a streak of light and shadow. Evelyn stood her ground, her finger hovering over the disruptor's manual override. "Come on," she muttered. "Just a little closer." At the last possible moment, she triggered the override. The disruptor unleashed a burst of energy that collided with the creature, enveloping it in a blinding sphere of light. The ground shook violently, and then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. The creature was gone, its essence scattered into the ether. The thaumic field stabilized, its chaotic spikes smoothing into gentle waves. Evelyn let out a shaky breath, her legs threatening to give out beneath her. Jack limped over, his face smudged with dirt but otherwise intact. "Well, that's one adventure I'll leave off my resume," Jack muttered, brushing dirt from his jacket. Myles slumped against a rock, his expression a mix of relief and exhaustion. "Agreed." Evelyn managed a weak smile, though her mind was already racing with questions. What had corrupted the Ceylor? Was it an isolated incident, or the sign of something more sinister? She didn't have answers, but one thing was certain, their mission had just become far more complicated. The days that followed were fraught with tension. The research team's encounter with the corrupted Ceylor had shaken them deeply, casting uncertainty over their mission. The previously tranquil thaumic fields now churned with erratic intensity, signaling profound disruptions within the planetary ecosystem. The Ceylor themselves were growing increasingly wary, their luminous bodies dimming as if reflecting the turmoil around them. Dr. Evelyn Cross stood at the edge of their temporary outpost, her eyes scanning the crimson horizon. The sensor pack strapped to her back emitted a faint, rhythmic hum, but its readings were erratic, making analysis nearly impossible. Despite the oppressive heat and the weight of their precarious situation, Evelyn's focus remained unshaken. She had a theory, one that could explain not only the corrupted entity they had faced but also the unraveling thaumic currents. The trouble was, proving it would require venturing far deeper into Ceylor territory than they had initially planned. "Myles, tell me you've got something," she called, turning toward the research tent. Inside, Dr. Myles Karim sat hunched over a console, his fingers flying across the holographic interface. He glanced up, his expression a mix of exhaustion and determination. "The disruptor data gave us a clearer picture of how the thaumic fields are structured, but there's something else." These fluctuations aren't random, they're patterned, almost like a signal. A signal. Evelyn's brow furrowed. You mean someone or something is causing this? Exactly. And it's not just local. The disruptions are originating from a region near the crystalline spires. The Ceylor call it the well of currents. If we're going to figure this out, that's where we need to go. Lieutenant Jack Ward entered the tent, his boots crunching against the sandy floor. Let me guess, he said, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. You two are planning to drag us straight into the belly of the beast. It's not a plan, Evelyn replied, her tone firm. It's a necessity. If we don't stabilize the thaumic fields, this entire region could implode. And I doubt the Ceylor will let us off the planet if we leave it worse than we found it. Jack exhaled heavily, rubbing the back of his neck. Fine. But let's be clear, I'm not here to play hero. Convince the locals, or we're out of here. The team's approach to the crystalline city of Thalanis was met with tension. The Ceylor, usually radiant and harmonious, now moved with visible unease. Their tonal language, once melodic, carried discordant notes that made Evelyn's translator struggle to keep up. The elder, a figure named Chauvin, met them at the city's edge, his silvered form dimmed to a dull grey. Evelyn stepped forward, bowing slightly in the Ceylor's customary greeting. Chauvin, we need your help. The disruptions in the thaumic fields are growing. We believe the source is at the well of currents. Chauvin's tones were sharp, his gestures rigid. The translator rendered his response with grim clarity. The well is sacred. It has stood undisturbed for millennia. To tread there is to invite chaos. With respect, Evelyn said, choosing her words carefully, something has already disturbed it. We encountered one of your kind, but it was changed, corrupted. If we don't act, that corruption could spread. Chauvin's gaze lingered on her, his aura wavering as though caught in indecision. At last, he emitted a resonant tone of reluctant agreement, the translator rendering it starkly clear. If you go, you do so at great peril. The well is not merely a source of energy, it is alive in ways you cannot comprehend. With Chauvin's warning echoing in their minds, the team set out toward the well of currents. The trek was grueling, with the terrain transforming into a surreal and unstable expanse. Sands gave way to jagged crystalline formations glowing faintly, while the air crackled with palpable energy. Jack took point, his rifle at the ready, while Evelyn and Myles followed close behind, their equipment struggling to keep pace with the environmental extremes. This place is unreal, Myles said, his voice tinged with both awe and trepidation. The thaumic energy here is overwhelming. It's like walking through the heart of a storm. Evelyn nodded, her eyes scanning the horizon. The crystalline spires ahead loomed larger with every step, their surfaces refracting the twin suns' light into dazzling patterns. But beneath the beauty lay an undeniable sense of foreboding. The closer they got, the more their equipment malfunctioned, forcing them to rely on instinct and observation. When they finally reached the well, it was unlike anything they had imagined. A massive chasm stretched before them, its depths obscured by a swirling vortex of light and shadow. The air vibrated with a deep, resonant hum that resonated in their very bones. At the edge of the chasm stood another figure, its form identical to the corrupted Ceylor they had faced before. Jack instinctively raised his rifle, but Evelyn stopped him with a firm hand on his arm. Wait. Let's observe for a moment. The figure turned toward them, its aura flickering chaotically. For a moment, it simply stared, its eyes, if they could be called that, glowing with an intensity that made Evelyn's heart race. Then it spoke, its tones distorted and fragmented, as though the well itself was speaking through it. You should not be here, the translator rendered. The currents are in turmoil. Your presence worsens the rift. Evelyn stepped forward cautiously. We're here to help. The corruption is spreading. If we don't stabilize the fields, this world, your people, will suffer. The figure's aura flared violently. The well does not need your interference. Leave, or face annihilation. Jack's finger hovered over the trigger. Evelyn, we're running out of options here. Not yet, she said, her mind racing. Myles, is there any way to counteract the instability? Something we can do without provoking whatever this is? Myles' hands trembled as he checked his console. There's a chance. If we can sync our disruptor with the well's resonance, we might be able to dampen the fluctuations. But it's risky. If we get it wrong. We won't get it wrong, Evelyn said firmly. Set it up. As Myles worked, the corrupted figure grew more agitated, its tones rising to a fever pitch. Jack stood ready, his eyes never leaving the threat before them. Evelyn's heart pounded as she watched the disruptor come online, its hum merging with the well's resonant vibrations. It's ready, Myles said, his voice barely audible over the cacophony. Do it, Evelyn commanded. Myles activated the disruptor, and the effect was immediate. The chaotic currents around the well began to stabilize, their wild oscillations smoothing into harmonic waves. The corrupted figure emitted a harrowing wail, its chaotic form convulsing violently before disintegrating into a cascade of radiant light. For a moment, all was silent. Then the ground beneath them began to shake. The well's vortex intensified, its colors shifting in rapid succession. Evelyn's console blared with warnings. It's overloading. We've got to shut it down. How? Jack shouted, bracing himself as the ground buckled. Evelyn's mind raced. If we reverse the disruptor's polarity, it might. Before she could finish, a deafening roar erupted from the chasm, and a blinding light enveloped them all. The blinding light receded, leaving an unsettling silence punctuated only by the faint hum of the well's lingering energy. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest as she blinked rapidly, trying to clear the residual glare from her vision. The air around the well of currents now pulsed with a rhythmic glow, the chaotic energy momentarily calmed. But the reprieve felt fragile, like a single misplaced step could unravel it all. Everyone okay? Evelyn's voice was hoarse, but steady. Still breathing, Jack muttered, hauling himself up from the jagged ground. His rifle hung loosely in his hand, the usual sharpness in his movements dulled by exhaustion. Whatever that was, it didn't kill us. That's about as good as it gets. Myles groaned from where he was sprawled nearby, his console clutched protectively against his chest. I think I just aged a decade. What the hell just happened? We triggered something, Evelyn said, her eyes fixed on the well. The swirling vortex had calmed, its colors shifting in mesmerizing patterns, but the tension in the air was palpable. The disruptor worked, but it's not over. The field's still unstable, and we're not alone. As if on cue, a low, resonant hum began to rise from the depths of the well. It wasn't chaotic like before, but deliberate, almost sentient. The ground trembled faintly, and Evelyn's sensor pack flared with warnings. She glanced at her console, her stomach tightening as she processed the data. Something's coming, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack tightened his grip on his rifle, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the chasm. Something? Let's hope it's not the bad kind of something. Before Evelyn could respond, the air above the well shimmered, and a colossal figure began to emerge. Unlike the corrupted Ceylor they had faced earlier, this entity was vast and ethereal. Strands of light and shadow wove together into a form both awe-inspiring and menacing. Its presence was overwhelming, a force that seemed to press against their very souls. Myles scrambled to his feet, his face pale. That's not in the mission briefing. No kidding, Jack said, his voice tight. Evelyn, tell me you have a plan. Evelyn's mind raced. The entity, whatever it was, seemed to be an extension of the well itself, a manifestation of the thaumic currents. If they attacked it directly, they risked destabilizing the entire field. But if they did nothing, the entity's sheer presence could overwhelm them. We can't fight it, she said, steadying her breath. Her eyes darted to the well, searching for answers. It's tied to the well. Disrupting the currents further will only worsen the situation. We need to communicate. Jack gave her a skeptical look. Communicate? With that? It's not impossible, Myles interjected, his voice shaky but resolute. The patterns in the field, they're structured, almost like a language. If we can tune the disruptor to match its frequency, we might be able to establish a connection. Might. Jack repeated. Great. Love the confidence. Ignoring the sarcasm, Evelyn nodded. Do it, Myles. Quickly. Myles set to work, his hands trembling as he carefully adjusted the disruptor's settings. Each click and adjustment carried the weight of their survival. Evelyn kept her eyes on the entity, her heart pounding as it loomed closer. Its presence was suffocating, a constant pressure that made her feel small and insignificant. "It's ready," Myles said after what felt like an eternity. "Activating now." The disruptor emitted a low hum, its pulses syncing with the rhythmic vibrations of the well. The entity paused, its movements stilling as if it were listening. Evelyn held her breath, every muscle in her body tense. "Can it understand us?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're about to find out," Evelyn replied. The entity emitted a deep, resonant tone, its vibrations rippling through the air. Evelyn's translator struggled to interpret, the words coming through fragmented and distorted. "Intruders, disturbance, why, here?" Evelyn stepped forward cautiously, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her. "We mean no harm. The currents are unstable. We're trying to help." The entity's tones shifted, a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "Help," brought chaos, "cannot understand." Myles adjusted the disruptor again, the pulses becoming smoother. The translator's output improved, the words gaining clarity. "Your actions have caused imbalance. The well cannot sustain your interference." "The imbalance started before we arrived," Evelyn said firmly. "We encountered one of your kind, corrupted by the instability. If we don't act, it will spread." The entity seemed to consider this, its form pulsing with a subdued light. "The corruption, an anomaly, source unknown. The well is fragile. Your presence risks destruction." "Then help us," Evelyn said. "We don't want to harm the well. Tell us what we need to do." For a moment, the entity was silent. Then, slowly, it extended a tendril of light toward the disruptor. Myles flinched but held his ground as the tendril merged with the device. The disruptor's readings spiked, and Evelyn's console flooded with data. "It's stabilizing," Myles said, his voice filled with awe. "It's guiding the currents." The entity's tones softened, its overwhelming presence giving way to a quiet authority. "Balance, fragile, must endure. Depart, leave this sanctuary undisturbed." Evelyn nodded. "We understand. Thank you." The entity began to dissolve, its form unraveling into strands of light that merged back into the well. The vortex calmed further, its colors shifting into a serene spectrum of blues and greens. The oppressive tension in the air lifted, replaced by an almost reverent stillness. Jack exhaled deeply, lowering his rifle. That was something else. Myles was still staring at the disruptor, his expression a mixture of relief and disbelief. "We actually did it. We communicated with whatever that was." Evelyn allowed herself a small smile. "We're not out of the woods yet. We need to get back and report this. And we need to make sure the Ceylor understand what's happening here." The team began their trek back, their steps lighter despite the exhaustion weighing on them. The oppressive tension of the encounter seemed to dissipate with each stride. The well of currents remained behind them, a silent guardian of a fragile balance. But Evelyn knew their work was far from over. The corruption, the instability, it all pointed to a greater mystery, one that they would have to unravel if they hoped to secure not just their mission, but the future of this world. The journey back to the crystalline city of Thalinis was both a relief and a challenge. Although the chaotic energy of the well had subsided, an ominous sense of unresolved danger weighed on the team, reminding them that their mission was far from over. The data they carried was a beacon of hope but also a burden, one that demanded they convince the Ceylor to take proactive steps to safeguard their world. Evelyn led the way, her mind racing with how to communicate the urgency of their findings. Chauvin, the elder who had reluctantly granted them access to the well, was waiting for them at the edge of the city. His silvered form flickered faintly, a sign of his growing unease. "You return." Chauvin's tones were sharp, his aura dimmed further. "What have you done?" Evelyn stepped forward, bowing slightly in the customary greeting. "We stabilized the well of currents." The entity there confirmed that the imbalance was not of our doing. It warned that the corruption is spreading, but it can be contained. Chauvin's harmonic tones wavered, his aura flickering faintly. He paused, his gaze lingering as if searching for clarity amid his unease. "And what is your solution, outsiders? What price must we pay for your interference?" Myles raised his console and activated a sequence of holographic projections. The data cast intricate patterns of light, each spike and curve a stark reminder of the stakes at hand. The elegant patterns of the thaumic currents danced in the air, interspersed with chaotic spikes that represented the corruption. "The well is critical," Myles explained, his tone steady but urgent. "Think of it as a heart, delicate, vital, and central to everything that sustains your world. If you establish a network of stabilizers around the well's perimeter, you can reinforce its structure and prevent the corruption from spreading. You suggest we tamper with what has sustained us for millennia." Chauvin's tones grew harsh. "What guarantee do we have that your methods will not bring greater harm?" Evelyn took a steadying breath. "We can't promise perfection, but if nothing is done, the corruption will overtake the well and spread beyond it. Your people, your culture, everything you've built here will be at risk." Jack stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Look, I get it. Trusting strangers isn't easy. But we didn't come here to break things. We came here to learn and to help. The well spoke to us. It's asking for your aid." Chauvin's aura flickered again, his tones softening slightly. "The well spoke to you?" "Yes," Evelyn said. "It's alive in ways we don't fully understand. It's trying to preserve the balance, but it needs your help to do so." For a long moment, Chauvin was silent. Then he emitted a low, resonant tone of agreement. "We will consider your proposal. But understand this, if your stabilizers bring harm, it will not be forgiven." "Understood," Evelyn said, relief washing over her. With the Ceylor's tentative agreement, the team set to work sharing their knowledge. Weeks passed as the team and the Ceylor worked together, overcoming technical hurdles like recalibrating equipment for alien energy fields and bridging cultural differences to ensure the stabilizers harmonized with their environment. The work was grueling but rewarding, and as the stabilizers came online, the thaumic fields began to smooth, their chaotic fluctuations subsiding into harmonious waves. Evelyn watched the first stabilizer activate, its hum blending seamlessly with the natural rhythms of the well. She couldn't help but smile, the culmination of their efforts filling her with pride. "Looks like it's holding," Myles said, his voice tinged with awe. "The readings are incredible. The well's resonance is stabilizing faster than we projected." "We're not done yet," Jack reminded them, though even he couldn't hide the faint grin on his face. Still, not bad for a team of meddling outsiders. Their work was far from over, but for the first time since arriving on Arethos V, the team felt a sense of accomplishment. The collaboration with the Ceylor had not only stabilized the well but also fostered a fragile bond between their species. On their final day, as the team prepared to leave, Chauvin approached them. His movements were deliberate, and his aura shimmered with a renewed vitality that mirrored the well's restored balance. His aura was brighter now, the dull gray replaced with a faint but steady silver light. "You have done more than we expected," he said. "The well's balance is restored, and the corruption contained. You will be remembered here, not as intruders, but as allies." Evelyn inclined her head. "Thank you, Chauvin. We've learned much from your people, and we hope this is only the beginning of a greater understanding." As the team boarded their ship and lifted off, the crystalline city sparkled below them, a testament to the resilience and cooperation of two vastly different species. Evelyn gazed out at the planet's surface, her thoughts already turning to what lay ahead. Their mission on Arethos V had been perilous and transformative, a reminder of humanity's capacity for both destruction and healing. "Think we'll be back?" Jack asked, breaking the silence. Evelyn smiled faintly. "If the Ceylor need us, we'll come. But for now, I think they're in good hands." The ship ascended gracefully, leaving behind Arethos V's shimmering surface. The team carried with them not just data, but the hope of a lasting bond between two vastly different worlds. But the bond forged between its inhabitants and the humans lingered, a spark of hope in a vast and unpredictable galaxy.